I mean, we're already providing 100% 15-year tax abatement for anyone that builds in the city. The mayor's reasoning for that, for wanting to do more, is that he felt that it wasn't right for us to put people in homes that they couldn't afford to heat. And then the other part of it is that it's unfortunate that we had some developers that were building really good projects, but they had no other incentive than a developer out there that was really just building to code and just skirting by code, and there was no differentiation. So we're still trying with that, and what we have is an evolution of that.
It'll be interesting to see what will happen with the state of Ohio if federal legislation passes cap and trade and winds up superseding the building code that the state of Ohio has, and whether Ohio will then not be sort of behind or be marked down for having done some of the work that they've already done. Anyway, so I wanted to shift gears for a minute and talk about the sort of business approach, since we have a number of businesses, organizations here today, just starting along the sustainability curve, talking about what this sustainability triple bottom line philosophy is to incorporate a sustainability program that benefits people, planet, and profitability. So with that framework, when you're meeting with businesses, what one piece of advice would you give them if they're embarking on a sustainability program, just getting started along the way? Lindsay,
I can take that one first. I have the unique opportunity to meet with lots of people from the community, whether they represent schools, businesses, all sorts of organizations at various parts of the road on their way to being completely sustainable. And the one piece of advice that I urge all of you to take home with you is don't be overwhelmed by how big of a topic it is. I think too often you decide you're going to start living green, and so you want to change the way you use water and change the way you use electricity and change the way you use natural gas, and oh my gosh, all of a sudden you get to a point where you can't do it all, and it's so confusing, and who do you listen to and who do you understand? So I think it's really important that you just do what you can. It's a lot easier to build off of a few small successes and to celebrate those successes than it is to build off of a huge, overwhelming to-do list. And that's my advice to myself, because I'm pretty overwhelmed every day. So.
That's great. Go ahead, Roger. Well, I just kind of can relate to that, taking things in small steps, because there is kind of an overwhelming amount of information out there. And I think one issue with implementing sustainability is addressing the issue of cynicism, because there's a lot of greenwashing that's out there. It's like you have product A, B, and C, and they all claim to be the best thing in the world. How do you distinguish what is really best? So I think it's important that there's leadership all the way from the top that really walks the walk. That's extremely important, because if you give anyone below an excuse to say you're not doing this, you won't be successful. But it is challenging because of all the trade-offs with sustainability. And one kind of example, I've been looking at what's the best way for our employees to drink coffee in terms of what type of device, paper cup, styrofoam, using your hands. Of course, you burn yourself. Using a ceramic mug or a stainless steel, like some other thermos. And you actually find that, it seems like the ceramic mug would automatically by far win. But if you look at how much energy it takes to make a ceramic mug, it's like 70, 80 times that to make a paper cup. And then the water you have to use to wash it, the energy to heat that water, the detergents that you use to wash that cup, the bottle that detergent comes in. Where does that bottle come from? Is it manufactured in another part of the world where there's poor labor practices? Right. The list goes on and on.
Drive yourself crazy.
And you really can drive yourself crazy.
That's what we do on Friday nights.
So something that seems really, really simple becomes very challenging. And so I'm hoping that people just make sure they look at all the different angles and just try to do what they think is right too.
That's great. Yeah, that's good advice. And I see from Eric's presence at the podium that we've come to the end of the panel portion of the discussion, but now comes the fun part where we turn it over to you, the audience, to ask questions of the panelists. Carrie in the back there has a microphone, so don't be shy. I'm sure you have lots of questions. I see one over here.
But first, some mid-program announcements.
Sorry. My first time moderating a panel. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a new leaders program featuring Andrew Watterson, Lindsay Baxter, and Roger Chang. We'll return to our speakers in a minute for our traditional City Club question and answers. Now we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is PR and Programs Manager Carrie Miller. First question, please.
Hi, I'm Dave Geyer. What financial metrics or standards are you using to measure the effectiveness of your initiatives?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that would probably be great for the city to talk about your climate footprint analysis, but.
Sure, I can start, and I hope I won't get in trouble for saying this, but we don't have a set in stone way of doing it just yet. And as I'm sure most of you can imagine, sometimes or often the money side does win out. We really have to try and look at all the different sides of it. So it's not just environmental benefit compared to the cost, but also factoring that people part and how we're providing services to our citizens and how we're bettering our city. So one example of our first attempt at doing this is a project we're undergoing right now, which is a retrofit of our street lights. We have a pilot project on our south side of the city where we have up metal halide, induction, LED, a few other types of street lights. I'm learning more about them than I ever wanted to, and we are actually utilizing the assistance of some students and researchers from some of our local universities to kind of help us come up with a matrix of how to balance out all these different things. And of course, upfront cost, the maintenance cost, replacement cost, electricity costs are all very high up on our list, but we're figuring out how to balance that with, carbon emissions, what type of light output, public safety, effects on wildlife, a whole handful of things. So that's a great question, and the truthful answer is we're working through that right now.
With Cleveland, the cost is a big piece of it, and that's probably because since 2005, the budget's been constrained, and so the mayor's really been driving cost. And so our principal metrics is what type of savings are we realizing. We just finished our internal carbon footprint, and currently conducting our carbon action plan, actually working with ICLEI, which is a nonprofit organization, and working with one of Lindsay's colleagues in Pittsburgh to create a climate action plan for the city. And we hope, as part of the AI summit that we're having in August, that we'll help to develop more ideas around how to do that. But principally, to date, our main metric has been cost savings realized to city's budget, and that's principally been it. So.
I think from a building standpoint, one thing that's focused on is resource consumption. And so how we measure our success is how much energy some of these buildings use. Mm-hmm. One of the problems is that energy modeling that's often done on buildings doesn't end up matching up with measured performance, just because it's really difficult to predict occupant behavior. But kind of doing more follow-up in the future is very important. And one thing that the USGBC just recently enacted in their new version LEED is that people who go for certification have to be able to release their energy and water consumption data so that there is this kind of verification.
Good. Just adding more to that, just from the perspective, when I say cost savings, we don't sacrifice the triple bottom line methodology to realize those cost savings. I'm just saying that our metric in helping to demonstrate what the importance is to the community or to the city and our operations is the dollar amount. And an example of that is when you turn a vacant lot into a garden that someone else is maintaining, that has a huge impact on the environment, but it also has a huge bottom line impact to the city. Our vacant properties cost us up to $6,000 per parcel just to maintain. So there's a huge cost savings to the city by turning that into productive land.